Most people think my personal success story came from losing 50 kilograms. However, I don't think it is. I think my real success story is that I looked at myself 70 kilos in the mirror and I still wasn't happy with the way I looked. As you can see, my weight has been all over the place over the past 8 or 9 years. It's fluctuated considerably. I've been at 120 kilos, I've been down to 70, and I've been about everywhere in between, and I've learned a significant amount of lessons from that. As you can see here, this is me at around 120 kilograms. I was finishing school, I was starting university, I was unhappy with the way I looked, I wasn't confident, I had no ability in the gym or anything like that, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do, except for I knew that I wasn't happy with my weight. Things were also getting worse. I felt like I had no get up and go to try and move forward with my life and really sort of make personal gains and do the best I could for myself. However, I realised that needed to change. So by 2018, I had begun to consider the idea of trying to lose the weight. I tried a few little things. I tried 1 meal a day. I tried sort of just surfing the internet to see whether there was anything that I could find that would convince me to lose a bit of that weight. However, when I started 1 meal a day, all that happened was I ended up putting the weight back on and probably even more in the end. I also had some external factors that were definitely supporting my views and the way of thinking about how much weight I wanted to lose. I could understand the implications of why being at that weight wouldn't be healthy in the long term, and that realistically at that age I'll get away with it, but later on if I was to stay at that weight, I'd probably cause some long-term health issues to myself, and I wanted to sort that out. So I made some plans and targets. I had absolutely no idea what a reasonable weight for me would be. I had no idea really what was under the surface. I'd never been particularly low weight at any point in my life, and I really wanted to know what sort of baseline to aim for. However, I just thought, you know what, if I throw myself into it, then I'll find out. I'll find out the easy way and get down to a weight that I'm happy with, and I'll just stop there. That's not precisely what happened though. I was determined. I thought I'd do more steps. I thought I'd just try and eat less, and it worked really well. By 2019, the weight loss was significant. I noticed how much different I looked in myself. I felt more confident than ever. I suddenly could wear a t-shirt that was relatively tight around me and not be embarrassed to wear it. However, the difference is that I still would wear them loose around the waist because I couldn't get rid of the stubborn fat around the bottom. I wanted that gone, and even though comparatively it probably wasn't that much body fat, I felt like I didn't want anyone to see it. I wanted to be the skinniest man on earth in reality. I was sort of locked in that mindset, and while that was motivating, I did consider how far should I take this. However, I didn't want to leave it there. I'd come too far to not get as lean as I possibly could, to get as in shape as I possibly could. So I kept going. I thought, realistically, if I lose as much body fat as possible, there'll be loads underneath it, that, you know, loads of muscle, and that I'll look absolutely fantastic. However, that's not quite what happened. In 2020, COVID hit. I moved back home from university, and this was kind of a turning point. I locked in even more. I focused on the weight even more. I'd eat 1 serious meal a day, and then the rest was just a couple of snacks. I reckon my calorie intake at one point got as low as probably 12 to 1400, which, considering I was working in a warehouse to earn some extra money while I couldn't be at university, I was very active, and that was not a sustainable amount. Also, at this point, I wasn't going to the gym or anything like that. The gyms were closed. I'd never really been to the gym up until this point, except for a couple of times with a friend just to see what it was all about. So this probably wasn't sustainable, but you can see sort of to the level of body fat I got, and actually I looked at these back when this happened, and I looked at myself and I thought, I still look like I've got quite a lot of fat there. I remember looking at the fat around my waist and thinking, I need to lose that. And I think I was getting to the point where I was completely blinded by the fact that I'd adapted myself to this lifestyle of losing more and more weight. over and over again, and the only thing that I'd learned was that scales go down equals good. And that's all I knew, that's all I'd learned, and that's the only thing realistically I was focusing on. I had a little bit of a reassessment. I I cleared out my room back at home. My mum was obviously complaining at me to remove all the stuff from my room. And I found from the original pictures that you would have seen at the start of this, I found the trousers that I was wearing on my school uniform on the final day of school. I found the polo shirt that I was wearing in sort of the pictures from back at uni. And I put them on and I'd seen how much weight I'd lost. I'd seen how much progress I'd made. And I think that kind of mentally turned me a little bit. It made me realise that I was still just chasing weight loss almost for the sake of weight loss and not for what I needed to do it for. What I needed to do it for was to be healthy, but I think at this point I was starting to get unhealthy. I was obsessed with losing weight. And I thought, I need to get back on track. The mindset changed. I went back to university for my masters, and I wouldn't say I gained loads of weight, but I certainly enjoyed my time there. And you know, COVID, things were opening up again. The gym back at uni was offering 40-minute sessions. You could basically book a slot, and I was more than willing to do that. It gave me sort of 40 minutes of, you know, maybe not every day. I think I probably did it 3-4 times a week, where I started to really get into the gym and started to learn my way around what was what. I was still very much in a main gaining period though. I was still very afraid of gaining too much weight. I thought if I gain the weight here, then I'll lose all the progress. But I needed to balance it up, that actually I could build muscle, which in turn, underneath any fat, would mean that I might look better. Also, in the long term, then when I cut, I'll look significantly better. And I needed to change my mindset on that. So going through to 2022 and late 21, sort of originally, I began a bulk. I thought, right, I'm gonna do it. I'm going to the gym regularly, I'm kind of enjoying it. At that point, in hindsight, I didn't really have a clue what I was doing. All I knew is that I went to the gym, I lifted some heavy weights, probably with terrible form, but I was making some progress. However, this bulk went completely too far. I enjoyed myself far too much. I had a season ticket to watch Brighton and Albion play football. I'd go every single weekend, home or away. If there wasn't one of those games, I'd go to a non-league game. And the difference is that it wasn't just going and enjoying the game, it was going and drinking a horrendous amount. And then going out and then ending up having takeaways, and I overate in this period massively. Before you know it, by sort of mid-2022, I was back at 100 kilograms. I'd gained all the weight back. Obviously not all the weight, but enough of the weight back almost immediately. And I remember that was the moment of realisation of how easy you could slip back in if you don't have the mindset. However, my habits were better at this point. I felt like although I'd regressed in terms of I'd regained a lot of the weight, I'd learned a lot of skills. I'd learned how to be useful in the gym in terms of how to use different machinery, I'd got sort of like an enjoyment for the gym. So I'd made progress, and I thought, well, if I can lose as much fat as I did and get down to 70 kilos, I can lose a bit of fat again. And that's what I did. I started to do some bulking and cutting sort of periods where over the next few years I'd really sort of locked into, actually I can allocate this period to gaining weight and allocate this other period to losing weight. However, I was never particularly good at that to begin, and I'm still probably not now. But realistically, what would happen is if I say to myself I'm on a bulk, I'd take it a bit too far. The difference is that now I've sort of gained a lot more, and I can enjoy those bulking periods a little bit more because I can eat a little bit more. But also, I started to manage my protein intake properly. I started to make sure I was eating the correct things, and actually that made it a lot easier to not overeat. And while I may have periods now that I bulk significantly, and realistically I'm not taking them as far as I did then. I also felt it was a turning point because I started a new gym in 2023. this environment was much better for me. It was a much more sort of, it was a less commercial gym and had a lot more different pieces of equipment, and I found it really engaging and found it really enjoyable. And I think actually this was realistically the turning point that I sort of needed, and I wanted to lock in and I wanted to progress myself. So by 2024, I think I'd started clearly gaining muscle. I look at pictures from back then, obviously there'll be a couple on the screen, but my arms were becoming more defined. I was clearly making growth, and while I wasn't the leanest during some of these times, I definitely started gaining lean mass rather than just gaining fat every time I went on a bulk. I wasn't drinking lots of alcohol and stuff like that realistically is going to mess with my testosterone. I wasn't, overeating rubbish. It was a period where, yes, I'd probably eat quite a lot, but I was training most days and I was bettering myself. Plus also, I think I did nail in, as I say, my protein intake a lot more. I started to track my food better. I started to become a lot more aware of what I was really aiming for, and I feel like I became more and more motivated. And by 2025, I think it made a huge difference. Even towards the end of 2025, I bulked back up to about 100 kilograms again, maybe early 2026. I put in the effort on the bulk, and I compare how I looked on the bulk at that 100 kilos compared to how I looked back in 2022 when I first did that significant bulk, and it's crazy to me to see the difference of how much lean mass has been built underneath it. That brings us to 2026, current day. As of right now, I'm in a cut. I'm down to about 88 kilograms, with a fair bit more to go with where I want to be. But I have a completely different mindset. I know that at the end of this cut, I'm going to try and sort of maintain my body weight a little bit more. I'm going to not just jump straight back into a bulk. I'm going to slowly bring my calories back in and try and maintain myself a little bit more. I've learned through trial and error that that's what I want to do, and that is probably the best way forward. I've made significant muscle gain on bulks in the past. However, I'd like to not have to worry about doing a big cut. I'm probably about halfway through my cut right now, and I'm starting to see significant progress with myself. I feel like I'm seeing kind of like muscles that I've never seen before and stuff like that, and I still feel that I'm here 8-9 years later from where realistically I started my journey, and I'm so unbelievably happy that I've made it this far, and I'm still going and I'm still motivated and I still want to move forward. I still want to see how low I can bring my body fat realistically. I'm never going to be super lean. I don't have any intention to do that, but I'm certainly in a situation where I can kind of test my limits, see how good I can look. I also think that compared to social media standards, I'm not the leanest. I've not got the most muscle. I've not got the most perfect physique. But I'm a normal bloke who has made the journey from 120 kilos down to 70 and back up to sort of the mid-80s, 90 kilos, but building it back with some lean mass and actually progressing myself. I feel that realistically I've gained a huge amount of knowledge over the last 8 or 9 years. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've done a lot of things that I wouldn't do again. I wouldn't even entertain. But at the end of the day, I know that I can probably help other people going forward from here. I know that at the basic level, I've kept a baseline. I've kept a level of consistency and desire to go to the gym that even through not being able to do this, not being able to do that, going and enjoying myself a bit too much there, I've lived life and I've enjoyed life while still consistently making progress. I'm proud of where I am today. Looking back, none of these versions of myself are failures. I see every single version from the 120 kilo me, the 70 kilo me, everywhere in the middle, the 100 kilogram bulk in 2022 that I had no idea what I was doing. I see every single one of these as a lesson and something that was necessary for me to achieve what I have done today. If I hadn't done those things and if I hadn't learnt those lessons, I wouldn't be anywhere near where I am now. I think If you're any of these situations that you've been in, whether you're overweight and want to lose weight, whether you're underweight and want to gain weight, I feel like I'm in a position where I'll be able to assist you with that. And going forward, I intend to make numerous videos about how I train, how I've lost weight, how I've gained weight, how I want to progress going forwards, how I keep things consistent. And realistically, I just want to assist you in the best way possible. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.